And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Titans of Tarot series. I'm here with my friend Stephen Bright, and this is my fifth installment for the Titans of Tarot series. So, hello, Stephen. How are you, my friend?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I'm very good.
Thanks for being here, and thank you, everybody in the chats. Let me just say hello to everybody, if I can, here. So, in the chat, we have the Whispering Well, Sandra. Hello. Blue Crescent Tarot. We have Toadstool Tarot. Robin. Hello. Patrice. Sage Advice Tarot. Let's see, Blue Crescent. Elemental Cardamancy, my friend Chris, hello. Richard, Longman Tarot. And if I missed anyone, my apologies. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. And I'm really excited about talking to Stephen today because both both in terms of tarot and on a personal level. Stephen is somebody I really respect a lot, and I've gotten to know him a little bit over the last year and a half, and he's just somebody I admire. So he's an author of a book called Tarot: Your Personal Guide, which is a great book, and we'll get to talking about that. He's probably most notably known for The Spirit Within Tarot, and more recently, the Rainbow Kipper. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar, but I just wanted to let you know in case anybody hasn't heard of Stephen. So, Stephen, I have a couple questions. I hope that's okay with you. So, I'm trying to get an idea who Stephen Bright is. Sort of paint a picture. So, I figured we'd talk about your early life first, and then we'll go into more relevant questions about tarot. So, you grew up in South London. You were born in 1972, which is that's an interesting time to come about.
Forever ago, yeah.
Yeah. So how was that? How was your experience? Growing up in South London, 1972.
Well, I mean, in my very early life, I moved around a little bit. I think I initially was living in Brixton, and then my parents moved to a place called Crystal Palace, and that's kind of where I did most of my growing up until I was about 17, I think, and then we all moved away to Kent, to the countryside.
Okay.
Um, but Crystal Palace and London in the 70s. It wasn't really a very, I would say, spiritual time. My upbringing, my parents were not into anything like that. So this is something that just kind of came from me. Even though, as you get older, you realise that there are other people in the family that have had those kind of interests or a little bit of background that you find out as you get older. Um,
That's really interesting. Yeah. So your parents were pretty secular then, not really very religious.
No, no. I mean, I went to a school which was like a church school, so I spent a lot of time there learning about Jesus and all of that kind of stuff, going to church and what have you. But no, I didn't come from a religious upbringing. In my father's side of the family, they were Catholics, but I think because my dad's only experience of religion, he didn't want to bring me up amongst all of that. So I was pretty much given free rein to choose what I wanted to do.
Yeah. That's really awesome. So you came to tarot at like a pretty young age. You said I know in the Spirit Within the bio, it says that you got your first deck in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And do you remember what deck that was?
Yes, it was the well, actually, there's two different decks because the first deck that I bought was during a supermarket trip, and over here, I don't think they do it so much now. I don't think they even do it at all. But they used to do like kits and things in the supermarkets, so you could like how to play chess or how to do this, how to read tarot, and they're all about the same kind of price. And I saw one on tarot while I was doing the shopping because my friends were coming over for dinner in the evening, and I just kind of gave it a once over, popped it in the trolley, and didn't really think much more about it. And in the evening, my friend's wife and I were drinking some wine, and we were sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, I got these tarot cards today." We had a look at them, and she said, "Oh, I've got some, but I don't really know how to read them." And we pulled a few cards out and read the interpretations. And then a couple of weeks later, I think I was at another friend's house, and I was staying there, and I met his housemate, and she said, "Oh, really, you should buy a deck that suits you." rather than this one that you got from the supermarket. She said, tomorrow we'll go into London and we'll look for the right deck for you. So we went to a shop called Mysteries in Covent Garden, which I'm sure a lot of people were aware of. And I went through the photo albums and looked at all the images. And the one that I ended up with was the Roeg tarot by Carl Roeg. It's a kind of like a Thoth clone.
Okay.
And so in a sense, it wasn't my first deck, but it was the deck that started me off really. I from there on, I used that deck probably for about 3 years without any other, and kind of just felt my way, because in those days I didn't have the internet back in the mid-90s, and there was a few books about, but not anything like what we have today. So I had a book which had Rider-Waite meanings in. I didn't know what the Rider-Waite was then, but I had a book with Rider-Waite meanings in, with Marseille pictures and a Thoth deck. So it was pretty confusing.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's pretty cool. I would have never guessed your first deck. I've never even heard of it. But
it's now it's quite a collectible deck now, if you can get hold of it.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out what it is, and I'll look at it later. But I love that it's Thoth. It's sort of different because most people start off with a Rider-Waite Smith. So it's nice to hear something much different.
I think if I had done, life would have been so much easier if I had it done. And when it came to writing my own book, the one that you showed, I wanted to write the book that I would like to have been given back then, because I was just really kind of jigsaw piecing things together and trying to work it out for myself, and looking at these cards which didn't seem to bear any relation to what was going on in the book. So
yes,
I persevered, but some people might not have done. Some people might have given up at the first hurdle.
I got this book. I actually sent you a picture when I got it, because it was like right at the start of the COVID thing, and I'm like, I've seen this book 1,000 times sitting on the shelf, but I never looked at the name at the bottom. So I didn't even realize it was your book. So then I picked it up and I was like, well, and I was like, well, I don't really need another intro to tarot book because I have a million of them. But because it's Stevens, I'm going to buy it. And it was very affordable. I mean, I think I paid like $11 for it. And it comes with this really nice poster, of all the majors. And it has like all these cool little features. But I think it's like the perfect book for somebody to start off with. I mean, just reading through it, it has simple kind of language. It's easy to understand. And what I liked most about it was you have in here, for instance, where you write, the lover, for instance, the lover's card. So you've done this all in Rider-Waite Smith, obviously, but you do like the lover's card as a person, which I found to be really like unique. I've never seen a book really do that, and you do it for pretty much every card, and that was actually very helpful for me, even as somebody who studied tarot for a while. So I appreciate your book.
I think one of the things is when I was asked to write the book in the first place, I think the idea was that I was going to write an intro book to tarot, and I just thought, there's a lot of books like that already out there. What's the point of me writing another one? So I thought I need to give it a little bit of an extra twist. And I think sometimes, when people are looking at court cards, you'll be told, yeah, but it could be a situation. So I wanted to kind of add into the book, if it was a situation, what would that court card be? And then kind of flip that. So what if the lovers, as you just showed there, was a person? What kind of person would they be? So I kind of wanted to just kind of add a little bit more to it. So it's kind of an intro to tarot, but on the other hand, it's also quite useful for somebody who's at an intermediate level as well.
Yes.
I think it goes past the beginner stage to some extent.
Yeah, it does, definitely. Yeah, because it had the look of a sort of an intro book, but once I got to know more, I mean, this book I still use actually, because if I'm, there's a lot of times you want to sort of relate, a major arcana card. It's easy to do with a court card, but for instance, the lover's card as a person or whatever, and get the personality aspects of it. I find it very helpful, but also it sort of helps you to understand the card too when you think of it through the context of a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, definitely very well done with that.
Thank you.
So in your bio here with the Spirit Within Tarot, it mentions you were clairaudient child. I'm not even really familiar with the term clairaudience, and of course clairvoyance, which is something I do know. So, what was your experience with that? If you could just tell us briefly about that.
Well, as a child, I would see and I would hear things, and it would mainly be when I went to bed. So I would go to bed and I would kind of find myself in this kind of halfway kind of state, which I think a lot of people do. That place in between being asleep and being awake. And when I got into that place, I would get these kind of flashes of noise and voices. And I could kind of get myself into a place where I could almost open up this part of my vision and watch like a really big TV screen, and I could see fields and I could see people, and people would kind of walk through onto this landscape and wave. And this all seemed kind of quite normal to me. I thought this was something that happened to everybody until I probably got to like my teenage years and people started to stay over and I'd tell them what I could see. And people were like, really? Before you go to sleep. And I realized this wasn't something that everybody did. Um, I don't see as much as I used to, but I can still get into that place where I can ask questions and people will come in and I can talk to them to some extent. Um, I don't do it as much as I used to do it, but
It
it
sounds a, it sounds a lot like active imagination to me. What Carl Jung did when he wrote the Red Book,
mhm.
like engaging with your unconscious in a way. But
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I would imagine it's mediumistic to some extent because I have people come to me and say things. I remember a little girl saying to me, "Where have you been? I've been trying to talk to you," and this kind of thing. Um, it's difficult because it's not something I can just turn on. So I have to kind of really kind of work to get myself into that state now. So it's not something that I use in my consultations with people in tarot. Sometimes I will feel things or I'll get ideas in my head or something will start to happen in the side of this part of my head where I can kind of get a feeling about something and I'll translate that. But the real voices, and if I get pictures, that's something really that happens when I'm in the quiet and usually before sleep.
yeah, there's something to that though about the that you know that area of being between awake and asleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that zone, and I've talked on my channel about that with Sarah, who is a medium. Way back, and I told her that I have experiences also when I'm going into I'm not quite asleep, but I'm not quite awake. And there's certain things I'll say, wow, I know this only when I'm in this state. It's hard to explain, and I can't remember the specifics of what it was because
Mm-hmm.
I've woken up. But when I'm in that state, there's certain knowledge or information that I have that I don't have when I'm awake. It's very strange. I can't
I've
really
kind
explain
of
it.
I've kind of learned over the years to kind of train myself to be able to put myself there. Without sounding completely crazy, it's kind of like I have different sections within my head, which are like different rooms, and I can take sometimes my conscious thoughts and put them in a back room, which means that I'm kind of almost have this vacant space that anything else can come into. But it's taken years to kind of be able to practice that and to make some kind of use of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating.
It's not an easy thing to explain either.
No, no, but I kind of understand what you mean, and I think that there's actually, I mean, there's some science behind that type of thing as well. You know what I mean? It's just, it's a bit woo for most people, but there's so much that we don't know about consciousness and the unconscious, and like where do we, it's like people tend to think about reality in terms of the physical world, but we exist in a very non-physical way when we go to sleep. It's like consciousness doesn't end there. So really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
That's okay. I mean, that's kind of like my early years, because all of that existed before cards. So as much as, picking up that deck of cards in the supermarket that day seemed quite random, maybe it kind of wasn't, because I was connected to those sort of things. I just kind of didn't realize that I was. I didn't make that link consciously at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar experience too, going into a store when I was 12 it was like early to mid 90s. I think I was 12. So, it was probably like 93ish. In fact, yeah, it was 93 because the Phillies won the World Series that year. And or no, they lost the World Series to the Blue Jays. But I went in the store on South Street and I remember having that feeling, like looking at the cards and feeling like I've seen these cards before, or like they're very familiar to me, but I couldn't really understand why, and they were just so cool to me. They seem so mysterious, And then of course I got them. My stepfather got them for me. But I feel like a lot of people who are into tarot have that experience, like the tarot, especially people who the tarot kind of takes over your life in a
Yeah,
way. It,
it's like a strange kind of unfamiliar familiarity, if that makes sense. It's
yeah,
like, yeah, you know that somewhere that you're kind of linked to these things, even though you've never seen them before, and they make sense even though they don't.
yeah. And as so many people say, I mean, I know, like, for instance, Rachel Pollack, she says the tarot chose her. Robert M. Place, who I spoke to, said the tarot chose him. It's
Mm.
like a lot of people who are interested in tarot always say the tarot chose me, so often. And there's something to that. I don't know what it is, but there is, it's very interesting. Um, so you wrote a dissertation on Waite and Crowley in college. I found that pretty interesting. So you were what, a grad student or undergrad?
I was studying a degree in fashion at the time, and part of it was that we had to do these dissertations at the end. And what I didn't realize, because it was an artistic subject, you could really kind of pick and choose. I didn't necessarily have to write about fashion. So I thought, why not write about something that I know about? Or, I don't need to spend loads of times in the library, because I've got these whole bookshelves full of books about tarot. So really, to my memory, because I can't completely remember what I wrote it about, it was about comparing the two different styles of paintings and symbolism, and what was in one and what was in the other, and where they kind of collided in places.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's really cool. It's very interesting. And so, at what point did you realize that you wanted to pursue this? You've made tarot a career. You are a professional reader. You're a writer. I don't know if you write anything non-tarot related or not. I'm only familiar with what you do in terms of tarot, so I don't know
not yet.
if I'm okay. So you're pretty much a tarot professional. I mean, would you say that was correct? I mean,
It sounds nice. Yeah, I can go with that.
so at what point in your life did you realize you wanted to do this? Like, it's not the easy. I remember a friend's mother told me when I was like, I want to be, I want to work with tarot. And she was like, yeah, that sounds like there's a lot of money in that. She said to me, it's like, it's something that people just don't really plan on pursuing often. So, at what point did you make that decision?
I think, it was something that I wanted to do for quite a long time. I mean, I was really interested in the art of the tarot cards as much as reading tarot cards. So, because I'm somebody who's creative and artistic, it was only a matter of time before I started thinking about, oh, well, it'd be really nice if it was done like this, and maybe I could have a go at creating a deck myself. But in terms of reading, I think I wanted to do it a long time before I actually did. And I think that confidence kind of tripped me up quite a bit for a long time. You think to yourself, oh, I'll start reading professionally when I know a little bit more, or I'll start reading after I've read that book, or and I kind of kept holding back, and people were saying, you do this really well. You should just get out there and do it. And eventually, I did. I booked myself into a fair, and I was really nervous. And then I just did those readings one after another. People were coming down and sitting with me and walking away either happier, or people were crying. Either way, I knew that what I was saying was affecting people, and that was a really good experience for me. In terms of teaching, I had the same kind of reservations initially, and it was only that my friend paid for me to go on it was a day tarot course just to see what it was like, and well, I hope the person isn't watching, but it was quite shocking, and it gave me the confidence to say, well, do you know what, I'm going to book up with this place and I'm going to see if I can teach tarot here, and that was where it all kind of started.
Cool. Hey, I just wanted to mention to the guys in the chat, if you have any questions for Stephen, just put them in all caps so I see them. And of course, I will do my best to get to them. If I don't see them, of course, it's not on purpose. The chat has a tendency to move quickly, but I just wanted to put that out there. So that's very interesting, Stephen. And you do mentoring as well, right? You now, how does that work for you? Like mentoring, do you have a lot of students that study
Well,
under you, or?
I don't take on lots of students, but and mainly recently because I've had so many other things to do. But I started off teaching public classes, and the problem a lot of the time was you would, because I don't think you can learn tarot in an afternoon, and it takes time. So when I teach people in a class, I like to have a good 5 or 6 sessions, so that might be every week, every 2 weeks. And the problem was that some people could do 2 of those weeks, some people could do 4, and it was just kind of a little bit all over the place. So I decided it would be good to take on people on a one-to-one basis. And I think there's a lot of students that benefit from that, because you do have those people who are sitting there who maybe want to ask questions but don't feel confident enough to. And then you have some people that dominate and ask loads of questions when you've got a group setting.
Yes.
Uh, and talking to somebody one on one, you can really go at that person's pace, and and I think people probably feel more confident and comfortable on a one to one rather than when there are other people in the group, maybe who have different levels of understanding or experience, perhaps.
Yeah.
So in terms of my mentoring now, I take people from complete newbies, people who've never picked up a deck of cards before, through to people who want to return to learn tarot, or more intermediate students. So recently I was working with somebody who had been reading for a long time, but he just wanted to kind of get a different view on how I read the Celtic Cross and see how that aligned with him. Another person wanted to deal with oracle cards. They were going to a fair, and they wanted to learn a selection of small readings that they could do. So sometimes it's about like people's delivery. They might be really, really used to doing one kind of spread, but maybe they're going to go somewhere where they need to do 10-minute readings, and they want to kind of learn how they can do that.
That's really cool. So
Anything that people want to learn, if it's something that I think I can help them with, then I'll kind of plan out a session or however many sessions it takes, and we'll do it.
I definitely agree with you about the one-on-one thing, because that's really a benefit in a lot of ways. Not just for tarot, but for instance, piano lessons, things like that. Always good to have a tutor or a teacher that works with you. So that's really, really interesting. What sort of reader would you say you are? Like, I know you started off with the Thoth you've mentioned. Are you Kabbalistic at all? Do you think of yourself as a Kabbalistic type reader, or?
Not really. If you ask me what kind of reader I am, I'd say I'm a kind of practical reader. I'd like to be able to give people, it's kind of, I read in the way that I write. I like to give people simple, practical guidance that they can do something with.
Yeah.
And that's, and a lot of the time, the people that come to me, that's what they want. We can go a little deeper if that's called for, or if somebody wants something that's maybe a little bit more spiritual about their life purpose or something like that. It really is up to the person who comes to me and what they want out of it. But most of the time, people just want some answers, and I can do that with the cards, and I can hopefully help somebody to feel more empowered, to feel more confident, and to have a couple of different avenues that maybe they could take. Something that they can do. I like that. I like to give people something that they can do after the reading. So I'd say I'm a practical reader. I don't, I spent a lot of time. I've read about Thoth. I studied the Marseille for a long time, but these days I'm not so hung up on the symbols. Perhaps I'm more interested in how people react to the stories that are in the cards and how they can help them.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people say that, and that's very interesting. Um, so I have Chris here from Elemental Cardaments. Somebody mentioned that my voice was a lot louder than yours. They told me to turn down my volume. So let me know in the chat if that helped. I have a loud voice anyway. I'm a pretty big mouth, so that's something you're just going to have to deal with. So Chris wants to know from Elemental Cardmancy, what deck do you use the most when reading for yourself / clients? Do you have a favorite?
I would say over the years that the deck that I've used the most for clients is the Rider-Waite-Smith, and it would be the one with the Tudor Rose backs. And I always really liked that. So many people didn't like that deck because they found it really bland, but I loved those kind of minty colours that it's got in it because I found them really calming. So that's the deck I probably used the most. In terms of favourites, one of my all-time favourites was I'm going to get this wrong. The Akuli Okutati. Do you know that deck?
No.
It's another one for you to look up, but it's fabulous illustrations.
Is it an older deck or is it a modern deck?
It's a self-published deck. I should have pulled some of these out beforehand.
Could you say it again?
Akuli Okultati.
Okay.
I think that's how you say it.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah, they're very. I think they're actually in ink. Actually, I might have a picture here because I did interview the artist in the Esotoracle. Here we go.
Very cool.
So hopefully you're going to see this. Oops.
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
So, they're very beautiful.
Wow, that is really, really beautiful. I love that style.
There you go. So there's the cover. Yeah, they're lovely. And I don't usually spend a lot of money on my tarot decks. I never really have. And I was in London and I just had this moment. I saw that deck on a table in Watkins in central London. And I was just compelled. I had to look through it. And I knew that I couldn't leave without it, even though it had a little bit of a higher price tag than I would usually spend on a tarot.
I totally get it. I'm at the same exact place. I've decided though, I don't, it's impossible, but I always tell myself I don't want to buy any more decks. I'm just going to print them on my own now, with the historic decks. But of course, we live in a great renaissance of tarot, and occasionally something will come out that, I just can't resist. For me, that's like one a week.
Yeah,
so
it happens, doesn't it? I mean, I don't really buy so many now. I'm fortunate enough because I run the magazine as well. I get review copies, so I do get a chance to see some new things.
Yes, really cool.
I don't buy them so much now. I have enough really to explore forever.
I mean, it's something you'll eventually, if you buy. I mean, we all have a tendency to be the same, in terms of buying decks. We all want to get a hold of these really beautiful decks when we like them, but ultimately, there's only so much space in a house,
Mm-hmm.
For me anyway.
I would very much like to get rid of a lot of them, to be honest with you.
Yes.
It's just the practicalities of doing that, and I don't want to be
well
office and sending them all off and what have you. So every so often I do a stall. So
Sandra and I, Sandra from the Whispering Will, she's actually in England as well. We're going to have a yard sale on my channel in like a week or two. So you're more than welcome to come on with us if you want. We're going to go live, and we're just going to talk about the decks that we are departing our collection. And if anybody is interested, it's going to be all people who are, either hopefully on Facebook or whatever. They can connect with us and we can, sell them. So you and Sandra could do the UK and I'll do the American side if you wanted to. Just throwing it out there. So let's see, Patrice. No, I'm sorry, Sage Advice. Let me show you this. Okay. So what was your inspiration for creating a tarot deck with silhouettes? So we're talking about the spirit within tarot.
Well, I never set out to create a tarot deck to have published. What happened was at the time I was wanting to teach tarot, and I wanted to write about it on a blog, and I was thinking, if I'm going to go through a lot of cards here, I could become involved in some kind of problem with copyright. So if I want to use the Rider-Waite-Smith as an example, someone might have an issue with me putting all these pictures up there, because I think there was a point when people were kind of concerned, or publishers were concerned about people using a lot of images on websites and what have you. So a friend of mine said to me, well, why don't you just create one yourself, And I had this one picture, which was the Five of Cups, which I'd completed, and it was sitting in a file, and it probably had been there for about 2 or 3 years already, just sitting there. And I thought, maybe I could go back to that and create these silhouettes. So once again, it's not the most amazing spiritual story of why I didn't really think too much about why I created silhouettes. I just thought they would look really nice. But as time's gone on, I realized that they're really great because they just transcend so many things. They transcend ethnicity, and sometimes they what's that one? I just read the comment.
Yeah, sorry.
Where was I? Yes, so it transcends ethnicity and sometimes age, and in some places even gender. So you've got someone who in a picture that can relate to the person that's being read for, or yourself, or anybody. You can kind of put yourself into that blank place.
Yeah. I got to tell you, so the Spirit Within Tarot for me was probably like one of the first like truly modern decks. I'm not going to that's probably not accurate, because it depends on your definition of what a modern deck is. There's so many modern decks. It's been going on a long time, but I feel like it's like you have like the chariot, the skateboarder chariot kind of vibe. It's like it for me. This was the first that I've got that was like a really modern practical deck. And I remember watching, I believe it was Tom Benjamin, and he recommended your deck. And I had only had a handful of decks then. I think I probably had like 4 or 5. Yeah, I didn't have many. I mean, I have hundreds now, but back then, so your deck was like one of my first decks, but it certainly was my first very modern deck. Most of the decks that I had at that point were old-fashioned kind of Rider-Waite-Smith. I might have had a Thoth, which I never used at that time, and a couple, maybe a Marseille. But so I don't know what it was like when you created. What year was it published in anyway?
2017.
17. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, it just seems like it's older than that, but I don't know. I really connected. This is one of my favorites. This here. This is the Five of Cups.
And that was the first picture that I created. That's the one that sat in the file on my computer for a good couple of years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I use this deck a lot. I grab it a lot, and it's a good deck for a lot of reasons. But I think, like we were talking about creative visualization earlier, and it's like picturing somebody there, because it's a silhouette. I feel it's a very practical deck for that reason, the silhouettes. But that's one I really liked. Let's see. This was interesting. This one here. This is the devil.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, a lot has been said about that card and people's interpretations and feelings about it. But for me, when I created it, it was very much how sometimes we can become like children, and we can become very vulnerable and needy when it comes to our desires.
Yes, it's interesting to hear that from you about that, because I thought about it. It was like like the child and the devil. It was like the devil has an influence on children. I was trying to figure out where you were going with it, but it's nice to hear that from you. Let's see. Just going to go through some of my favorites. Oh, the Empress. I love the Empress. This is a great Empress card.
And that's a really interesting one in the sense, what I was saying about silhouettes before is the fact that picture I had drawn from just a model, the drawing of the woman. But when I look at it now, it looks identical to a friend of mine. And it was never ever meant that way. And she looks at it and she thinks it's her, and it's not her. And that's the great thing about silhouettes, is you can kind of see people in your life and recognize them in the silhouettes in the cards. And that's great for like clients as well, because they'll see people in them, or they might see themselves as well.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, this was the one I was talking about, the chariot. So there are lots of decks that use skateboarders for chariots now, more than one anyway. But I believe yours was the first that I ever saw, and I remember thinking, wow, what a great idea for a chariot card.
I think
And
the Gay Tarot from many years ago, I think that has a skateboarder, but that was something I'd forgotten about actually when I created that. My reason for that was because the idea of focus and determination, and we usually see the sphinxes, or we see the horses, and how the charioteer needs to control with his will, those animals. And here it was about how you can control, being on the skateboard and not go into those rocks on either side. So you kind of really kind of concentrate to move forward.
yeah, that's really cool. It's really nice to hear. I'm not going to go through every card, obviously. I would love to. Maybe just one more. Let me see here. What's your favorite that you created?
I really like the ones where you look at them from far away. So it's almost like you've just stumbled for, you've walked onto a landscape and you've just stumbled on somebody hanging from a tree, and they're not right in front of you, they're far away. It kind of makes it, yeah, like that. What's going on. The same that the hermit is sitting on a mountain or a hill. Strength is another one. You see this lion and this guy, and they've got their eyes locked on each other, but it's not happening in front of you, it's kind of happening further away, so you feel like you're
Yeah,
kind of witness to something.
yeah,
Quite like.
I like the strength card too. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Here it is. Yeah, I like that. The hangman, of course, is like the card that I think I always say that the hangman's sort of my hero,
Mm-hmm.
like the hero of the deck. And it's just like one of them cards that I look for, like when I get a new deck. Do you have a similar kind of thing with like a major arcana card? Do you have a favorite or?
I do look at the hangman. I do like the hangman. I sometimes, okay, and this is not having a go at any other decks, but this is just a personal preference. I do like my hangman to be a man. you know,
Yeah,
but sometimes sometimes they'll be titled hanged man, but there'll be a picture of a woman. So if you're gonna have a hanged woman, I'd quite like it to be a hanged woman. I don't actually know if there's any decks out there with a hanged woman. I've seen a hanged one.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't think I've
I'm
seen a hanged.
sure there are.
There probably.
They, I'm sure there is one out there. I really like the concept of now. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but you were working on a deck before you completed the Kipper. You have sort of a bunch of projects going on. I know you're busy, but there was one deck you were creating an all male deck, which I actually I like that idea.
You're in it. That one.
I know, yes, that one. I was going to say the Nine of Pentacles is my favorite card, and I haven't seen the deck, but that's one. So how is that working out? By the way, is it
That really is on the shelf at the moment.
okay? Well,
Because I don't know. I probably got about 15 cards into it, and then I started to write a book for Liminal 11, which is called The Oracle Creator, which will be out this year, and that's about how to create an oracle deck or a tarot deck. How to plan it, how to print it, how to publish it. So that took up a lot of my time. And then
yeah.
after that, I had another project I was working on, and then another book. So, and now I have some other things coming along that I've got to work on. So that's kind of taken a kind of a side
It's
step
all
from.
right. Well, it'll come back to you eventually.
It will come back. Yeah.
Um, you seem to be like really into Oracle right now, and that's really cool. Like I noticed that on was it social media you mentioned that you are now offering Oracle readings in your professional practice,
Mm-hmm.
which I was, and then you of course you have the book, which you've written on, um, making your own Oracle. That's cool. Did you want to talk about the book a little bit?
Yeah, I was asked to write it by Liminal 11, who published the Modern Witch Tarot, the Lunar Soul Tarot. And I said, yeah. And once again, obviously, I had to take it that little bit further, rather than just talking about ways in which you could create the oracle of your choice or the tarot that's in your head. I wanted to really get involved in how somebody plans that, because I think sometimes that part of it can be a little bit neglected. And so I think you need to really plan an oracle, make sure that it works, or a tarot deck, before you just start putting pictures in there and naming them. But then I wanted to go even further to kind of look at, well, how can you publish this? Do you approach a publisher? Do you self-publish? Do you do a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo? And I kind of wanted to give somebody a manual so they could go right from that very first idea through to actually delivering that product, which meant that I had to research all of these things, because I didn't know. I've never done a Kickstarter, so I didn't know what you had to do or what the pitfalls of that might be. And the book itself, it has a lot of interesting ideas of how to create these things. It looks at individual stuff, like color, different kinds of setups for an oracle, so I've got a directory that will be in there as well, which will look at all different symbols. But it also has all of these kind of breakaway interviews with people in the industry who've already done this. So we have people like Rosario Salerno, who have painted his tarot. So we look at how that was done, and he offers inspirational ideas about how you can paint a tarot, and the things that you might need to be aware of. We have Kathleen Matthews talking about using art that already exists. We have photography tarots like B Nettles. So I've kind of pulled in all of these great people, Jason from the my brain just had to go, didn't it? The Fountain Tarot, Jason Gruhl from the Fountain Tarot. All of these wonderful people who've done great decks successfully to kind of share their expertise and their experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really like that you took the time to write a book about that. And Kristen Louise, who is a friend of mine in the live chat, she is very into Oracle creating right now. So keep an eye out for that book, Kristen. I'm sure it'll be very handy. She's created a few already, so it seems like a fun process. I thought about.
It's not just about getting them published. I wanted to kind of acknowledge that you could sit at home and make your own deck one way or another, and just use it for yourself. It's not just about how to get out in there and get published in the world. It's about making these things for all different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And I've included a lot of different reasons why people create oracles and tarots, and they're not all about being published. People have their own personal and emotional needs sometimes for doing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I thought about writing a book on the card making process, because there's almost no resources whatsoever. There's like a couple of paragraphs in some art encyclopedias written in 1800 or 1790 about the process, but it's very, very, because it was a very closely guarded secret in a lot of cases when they were making these cards in the card factories. Plus, card makers just didn't write books. I mean, it's just not something they did. So I thought, well, I've had a really hard time finding resources about how to make it, how to actually make the cards like the way they were made, but I've successfully found a lot of methods, and I should really write a book on that. I think, even if it's something small,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really, really interesting to know. So, and then you have Anne Stokes, the Anne Stokes project coming up, which I thought was really interesting, and I saw the art for that, and it looks amazing. She's created a tarot deck before, the Gothic tarot, right?
Yes.
This is the Gothic Oracle.
Gothic Oracle. Yeah. So basically, this this was it was going to happen that Anne Stokes was going to have an oracle, and I was asked to write the book to go with it, and it was a nice project to do after writing so much of this, kind of the stuff that I'd already been writing about tarot. It was nice to go in and use my imagination and look at her paintings, find out what they were all about, and then kind of just let that expand in the text. So yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that.
Cool. Yeah, the art looks really good. If anybody's interested, wants to see, I don't know if there's pictures of the actual deck, but you could see Ann Stokes has a really great Instagram account if you want to check that out. Of course, Steven is also on Instagram, and he has a website, a blog. I'll put that also down below as well. Once this gets published, I'll have all the information in the info box. So that's really exciting. And then just a bit about the Rainbow Kipper. How did that come about? That's a really interesting project.
Yeah, well, what happened? Well, I went to the Tarot Association of the British Isles conference. I was speaking there, I think it was 2018. And I was going there to talk actually about different kinds of cartomancy and playing card reading that I had used over the years and how I developed them into a system for tarot. So that was my presentation. And Toni was going there to talk about Kipper, and we'd had this, brief like kind of conversations online, text kind of chat, but we'd never actually met in person. And when we met each other, we hit it off, and she gave me a copy of her deck and book, and I sent her a copy of my tarot. And then we started thinking about, I wonder what this would look like if we did something together. And I started sharing with her some of my ideas about color coding the Kipper cards, in the same way that I'd done with Spirit Within, where I color coded the suits. And that's kind of where Rainbow Kipper came from.
I don't know a whole lot about Kipper. I've been working with this, and I actually find it really interesting. It's very practical. Kind of reminds me of like sort of open style Marseille reading, like the Ben Dove method or whatever. When you look at the cards, you see what the pictures are doing. It's like which way they're facing and so forth. Like it's very kind of practical in that way. But I find that the colors are very helpful. You know what I mean? Because you can lay out all the cards and then spot patterns and see like, clusters of colors and stuff. And that's really interesting.
That was exactly the point behind doing it that way. It was the fact that, especially if you look at like the 1890s standard of Kipper deck, as much as many people are aware of what's kind of coded into those cards in terms of the directions and, different ways that people are facing and the reasons behind that, it can just look like this big jumble of cards, especially if you're going to read a grand tableau. But the color-coded Kipper allows you to see, as an example, that the stop cards would be in red. So that means that if you had a lot of those in a smaller reading, you would kind of get the idea that not much is moving. But it also kind of shows you in kind of story layouts and lines where the action stops and then where it starts again. And alternatively, you have movement cards which are in blue, so you can kind of see where things are moving forward. So all of those cards just kind of help people. I think seasoned readers as much as new readers to the Kipper, it kind of just helps you to look down at it and kind of say, well, I can see in these clusters that we've got quite a few people over here. The people cards or the green cards, and you've also got those two main character cards which are completely different to anything else. So you can follow the line of their eyesight and see what's coming into their life, the things that maybe they can manage.
That's so cool. Mendy has asked if you were a Kipper reader previously, or did Toni introduce you?
I had a Kipper deck already. I don't remember the name of it, and I tried to read Kipper quite a few times, but I didn't really feel the spark. I think the problem with a lot of the Kipper decks out there is, and I think the same happens with Lenormand as well, that you can have these very fanciful decks when really what you need is the very simplistic images that you can hone in on right away,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we wanted to do. So I learned more about Kipper in the creation of this deck than I ever knew before. So I kind of dabbled, but I was by no way competent Kipper reader.
Yeah, I had a similar experience too. I bought Ciro Marchetti's Kipper deck, and it just sat and sat. But then I got yours, and I was like, I should probably learn how. I also saw, I think you did a video on it or somewhere on Instagram where you were explaining how the significator cards worked. So that kind of drew me in. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And then you'd put both you put 2 males and 2 females for for same-sex couples and people like that. And I was like, wow, it's so cool.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes if you were going to read the Kipper generally as a male, if you're identifying as a male, you would use the male card, and whoever you were talking about would take place as that female card, whether they were male or female. But we just thought it would be really nice, because it's just that kind of that opposites. But we thought it'd be really nice to just be able to, if you wanted to read about a same-sex partnership, that you could just introduce and replace that female with a male if you wanted to, and vice versa for females.
Do you do any Kipper readings now in your practice, or is it something that you
No, not
okay.
yet.
Okay, well, that would be interesting to see, So, Stephen, is there anything? I know we're on a time constraint today. Everybody's probably watching on their lunch break anyway, so we agreed to keep it under an hour, almost at an hour. But is there anything you would like to tell my audience or about upcoming projects or anything that I missed? The esoterical. The esotoracle.
The esotoracle, yeah. I mean, we're just rolling up the last. There you go. Just rolling up the last things that we have to do on issue 4 at the moment. So that will be out in May, and you can buy that in hard copy, and you can buy that digitally as well as a download. So yeah, I mean, that's the next thing, and then I will be getting down to creating some more stuff. I've got another project to do for somebody else's deck, and I have an oracle of my own, which I'm going to start working on soon.
That's very exciting.
I'm going to do it. So yeah.
Cool. Do you have a title yet, or is it sort of a working?
Oh, it's it's out there at the moment. I kind of know what I want to do. One of the things is, the silhouettes were perfect for Toni's deck, but I do illustrate things in a lot of different ways, and for different projects I have to think about, would that look good like this, or maybe I need something with a bit more of a vintage feel for this. So I've got to find the right way to illustrate it.
Cool.
And then I can get on to creating it and writing the book. But that will probably be the next thing.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for coming on to my channel. I really hope you'll come back sometime, even if for a yard sale. We can sell some of our decks. we can have a little I'll turn into an auctioneer, And thank you everybody in the chats as well. Special thank you to my moderators. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Stephen, hang on just one second. I'm going to end. Thanks again, everyone.